And I want to talk about it from a different spin. It's still trending. I don't know if I think you've heard that this past weekend, this January 6th called Jake Lang. Yeah, because he popped up in the space last week, Thursday, trying to promote it. Protect White Americans rally in honor of Austin McCaff. And so no one showed up. So I said, shout out to all the white people that did not fall for the okey doke. So nobody didn't show up. It was a failed rally, and he had the audacity to call Austin McCaff father to say, "Oh, we're here supporting your son." And the father was like, basically, F off. I'm not associated with you. I don't want to be associated with you. Leave me alone and keep my son name and pictures out your mouth and off your website. So he did not want to associate with that man. So no new evidence has not come out. The only thing that has come out was the police report. And a lot of people on social media, whether it's YouTube or X, they are doing a lot of assumptions. Oh, it was self defense because of this, it was self defense because of that. You don't know. And
Well, let me say
well, this
something.
is the question. Let me say this. Let me set it up. So this is the police report. In the police report, it just records the officers when they got on the scene and arresting Karmelo. Let me finish. And they had only a list of names of all of the teenagers that possibly witnessed it, and they took their cell phones. None of their statements is in the police report. So the question I have for you is, what is it that we don't know about the Karmelo Anthony case? So you're going to say what you want to say, but the question I'm asking you is, we don't have the evidence, but what we do have, what is it that we don't know as of
Well, the
now?
question is not really the right question. Let's
It was
assume.
the right question in my head
Well,
when I
I
wrote
know,
it down.
but let me illustrate what I'm talking about very quickly. What the real situation is the defendant himself claimed that he was exercising self-defense. Let's assume that everything he claims is true. The problem is under the laws that exist now, unless a jury engages in jury nullification, if everything he says is true, the question becomes a legal one, a technical one. Under all of those circumstances, was he entitled to engage in self-defense by use of deadly force? So, in other words, let's assume everything he says is valid. Everything he claims gets backed up by the witnesses and evidence. The issue boils down to, would that enable him to have a reasonable belief that he was going to die or was going to suffer life-threatening injuries? Because in layman's terms, that's the only thing that justifies the use of deadly force. He claims, well, people are claiming on his behalf that these were two size large white guys and they were going to whip him. Just because you get your behind kicked, that's not legally sufficient to justify the use of lethal or deadly force unless you're likely to be killed in the process. Not possible, not remote, but likely. In other words, likely is determined by what the reasonable man would do. The reasonable man is 12 people on a jury. That's what reasonable man means under American law. The jury is a single entity. The reasonable person is the 12-person jury. And if they think it was reasonable, fine. If they don't, you got a murder case, homicide case, manslaughter, negligent or reckless homicide, depending upon where you are and what state you're in. So it's something that I've seen a lot, both on the bench as a judge, both as a criminal defense lawyer, and growing up in South Central Los Angeles, which wasn't even called that when I was growing up. And too often, what happens is scared people get away with killing too many other people because they claimed they were fearful, or they actually were, and they acted with deadly force in a situation that did not merit that, where the deadly force was a great escalation. And one of the things that's bad is our culture right now in the inner city, in some portions of the various barrios, does not deal with what the Spartan mothers used to teach their sons. Son, come back with your shield or on it. In other words, you are a warrior. You honor your family by acting as a warrior with the ethos of a warrior. Our boys are being raised to be scared. They are raised to be emotional. They are raised to think that they can go take somebody's life because they are offended, or they may get bruised and battered. Bruised and battered is not sufficient, because we have boxing matches, we have wrestling matches, we have full contact martial arts, we have football, we have rugby, we have all of these sports where people get routinely battered, bruised, and bloodied, just as bad, much worse generally than what would happen in your typical old time fist fight. So when somebody is going out there and spending all of their time watching sports on television, watching the prize fights, watching the cage fights, watching the wrestling matches, though they tend to be a bit fake, and watching all of the other full contact sports, it seems incongruous for somebody to say, I was afraid of getting done less badly physically in these athletes that I glorify in a fist fight. So I became terrified and I shot this guy, or I stabbed this guy. Now, the thing is going out. He didn't intend to kill him, but he used deadly force. So this resolves not whether somebody intended to kill, but whether somebody intended to use a deadly instrument. And the statutes, the common law, do not differentiate between one deadly instrument and another. For example, I said this the last time on the X space, but some people didn't get it. Stabbing somebody in the chest with a knife, did you intentionally stab them? That's all that goes into the equation, not whether you intended to kill. Why? Because the issue is deadly force, the use thereof. And let us take the same thing with deadly force carried to another different thing degree, but it's still the same. Let's say you pull out a 1911 45 auto and shoot the guy right in the chest. Bam! All right, you shot him with a 45 in the chest. You use deadly force. You take a knife and you stab him in the chest. You use deadly force. Does anybody sit there and ask the question, well, did he intend to kill him when he shot him dead center in the chest with a 45 auto and hit him where he was aiming? It doesn't make any difference. You pull the trigger and you intend the possible consequences of pulling the trigger. It's the same with the knife. You stab somebody, you are presumed to intend the consequences of the stab. And the question comes in, were you entitled under the situation to defend yourself by use of deadly force? And all of this other stuff about the circumstances around and about it, that becomes the burden of the person who is that becomes a burden that must be established by the person that's claiming this affirmative defense to a crime. If you kill somebody, it's a crime. But under certain circumstances, it may be justifiable, and it becomes justifiable homicide. The crime of the homicide becomes excused and justified if you had a right to self-defense. So the right of self-defense has all kinds of considerations like escalation in the degree of force. Somebody's punching you and you come up with a knife or a baseball bat or an axe, you're pretty much if you are a grown, healthy male, you're pretty much out of it. And then the guy that says, well, the assailants were bigger than him, or assuming there were two, even if they were, well, what that means is anytime one of the parties to a fist fight is bigger than the other one, if the little guy is losing, that line of logic would say he could pull out a gun and shoot the guy if he's losing, or he could stab him in the chest if he's losing. And there'd be a whole lot of dead folk if that was the case. So what usually happens is you have a right to stand your ground. Damn near every state in the union had stand your ground as part of its law until a very few, just a handful in New England and a couple of other places decided to say you had to try to run. And if you couldn't run away, then you could use self-defense. But in
Yeah, New
this case,
Jersey.
when you are in a fist fight and you're losing, get on up, leave, stop. That's your option. But in
So
this case, somebody stabbed somebody in the chest, and we have this question of whether that was justified under the circumstances. And all of the woke folks say it is. Now, for purposes of this discussion, and I'll leave it at that, what I am hearing from these woke folk, what I heard on that X space we conducted last week, is exactly what you get from the DEI logic, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the CRT critical race theory, which is you set somebody up as a chronic victim, impose in their mind the victim's mentality, so everybody's dumping on them. And that's supposed to justify some kind of retaliatory attitude where you take any excuse and you go kill one of them. And that's just the wrong way to think about stuff.
mhm. Well, so basically, you kind of did answer the question, what we don't know about the Carmelo Anthony, because the police report is just a timeline of what the police did when they arrived and, the suspect or whatever. It's like a timeline of events, but not exactly what happened. But there is a paragraph here that says, um, the victim, Austin, and the suspect, who was later identified as Karmelo Anthony, was from Centennial High School and was visiting and was sitting under the Memorial High School tent. Austin had told Anthony that he needed to move out from under their team's tent, and Anthony grabbed his bag, opened it, and reached inside and proceeded to tell Austin, touch me and see what happens. No one really thought Anthony really had any weapons in his bag. And Austin proceeded to touch Anthony. And then Anthony told Austin to punch him and see what happens. A short time later, Austin grabbed Anthony to tell him to move. And Anthony pulled out what, and they blurred out the person name, recalled as a black knife, and stabbed Austin once in the chest and then ran away. Austin began grabbing his chest and telling everyone to get help. Such and such advised he did not know Anthony's name, but stated another Memorial Track member, such and such, was friends with Anthony and he could identify Anthony. Such and such described Anthony as a black male, skinny, with possible a something, short, puffy hair, wearing Centennial High School clothing. This concluded my contact with such and such. So this was one of the people who they, asked, I guess, what happened. And upon my arrival, they're filling out their reports and stuff like that. And they have a list of people names and said they took their cell phones. Um, yeah, like here. And
Let me say this. As I said, enough's in the record to evoke the defendant's claim of, well, and his lawyer says this, that the defendant was engaging in self-defense. That makes everything else kind of go by the wayside, except for whether or not it either sustains or defeats the necessity of him showing that he had a reasonable belief that he was about to die or suffer life-threatening injuries if he did not use deadly force. That's what it amounts to. Was he about to die, or was he about to suffer life-threatening injuries? Now, all of the rest of it doesn't make any difference, because the jury's going to have to find that that was the case. Otherwise, his use of deadly force was not justified, even if he otherwise had a right to self-defense, which he did. So the question becomes even more complicated in one sense. Like, did he even get hit a blow? If he got just hands put on him, that's one thing. That's certainly somebody grabs you, unless there's something else, like the person telling you, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to do this to you, I'm going to hurt you badly. And under the circumstances, you perhaps have some familiarity with the assailant's history, and that might be taken in the context of, I'm going to die if I don't use deadly force, or I might be hurt so bad that I'll almost be dead, or I could be in jeopardy of, being sent to the hospital and being in critical care. Now, that's, even from what the defendant's lawyer has been contending, I don't see that. But he's presumed innocent until proven guilty. My concern, since to me, this is a completely routine case, and as far as homicides go, it's like shoplifting to theft. You get a whole lot of shoplifting cases in the criminal justice system. You get a whole lot of these fright-driven, fear-driven homicides. And I don't like the idea, because forget the fact that you had somebody who is white and died. Let's just say the problem is 19 out of every 20 times something comes up like this, the surviving person claiming self-defense and the dead person are all of the same ethnic group. And this is what drives so many homicides in our community. That is fear. Nobody can engage in duke it out man on man, because some clown is likely to go kill you because he's about to piss his pants scared.
So let me
So
read this. Let me read
what
this super chat real
yeah,
quick.
see, I mean, it's bad, and a lot of people don't get it. And I know folk don't like me saying this, but I don't care. It's just,
Let me
you know,
read this. Let me read this. It
yeah,
says, if thank you, amazing disgrace. He says, if that's grounds for self-defense, everyone else will have to live with at that as the standard for self-defense through precedent.
yeah, it is. It's the universal standard. It's been that way for quite a long time. Not long after Robin Hood's day, which is in the 1160s and 1180s. So that's almost
The
1,000
question
years.
is, here's the thing, is this one statement in a police report of someone trying to recount what happened, but other than that, there's no new evidence, no motive, there's no new evidence. You only have the police report, right, and a lot of public speculation. So what is it that,
It doesn't make any difference.
no, the question I'm saying, what is it that we don't know because we're
It
not
doesn't
going
make
to
any difference.
know? We're not, I'm talking about legally,
I
like,
mean, legally, it doesn't make any difference. The thing is firmed up. The defense, his lawyer, the defendant himself, is that he engaged in self-defense. The only issue that comes up is, was the use of deadly force justified? And in order to justify it, you have to show that the defendant was likely to have been killed or suffered life-threatening injuries.
No, this is the question I'm asking you when it comes to a lot of people are assuming this and assuming that. So when I say, what is it that we don't know? You, as a legal expert, would say, you don't know if such and such happened, or we don't know if, like, there aren't there like these legal
No, this one is a slam dunk. Either he was in jeopardy of dying or getting life-threatening injuries, or he was not.
okay,
And everything else
doesn't matter.
doesn't matter.
Just those
That's the
that's
issue.
okay. Okay.
He had a right to self-defense. The problem was, did that right of self-defense extend to using deadly force,
All
which
this
is
about race and
all
apparently
of that's
Austin black friends saying he's not a racist, and all this new
is
all this else. Okay.
totally irrelevant.
Hmm.
See, it's an affirmative defense. Ordinarily, when you have a defense, it's I didn't do it, or what happened is not what you're claiming happened. But in this case, the defendant is saying, I admit I did it. I administered the fatal wound, but I am claiming a matter of right. So that matter of right only lays if he was likely to have been killed or suffered death or life-threatening injuries if he had not. So those are the only issue. That's the only issue that is going to be out there. All of the evidence goes to establishing that. He's already admitted. His lawyer reconfirmed that he did it. He stabbed the man in the chest, but he claims justification. So all of the rest of that, you know,
So the only two things here, say that again for everybody in the room.
the only things that count, well, okay, one, he had a right to self-defense, no question. But as to using deadly force, he has to show that he had a reasonable belief that he was going to die or suffer life-threatening injuries if he had not used deadly force against the deceased. That's it.
Okay. Now, one more thing about the Karmelo Anthony case. Now, the Fresco police is investigating after the families, the McCaffs and the Anthony families, are being harassed with swatting calls. So it says the families of Austin McCaff and Karmelo Anthony are facing unrelenting harassment that's putting their safety and the safety of their neighbors at risk. Um, Twice since the 17-year-old high school student Austin McCaff was killed, Fresco police officers have been sent to his mother's and father's home because of prank 911 calls. He would not go on camera, but Austin's father, Jeff McCaff, told CBS News Texas that he's worried someone will get injured or killed by what's happening in his neighborhood. Images and video show what happened outside of Jeff McCaff's home in Fresco on Thursday. SWAT officers with guns drawn responded to a 911 that no one inside had made.
What happens is, look, what this swatting is about is some punk calls up and says, I'm at this address, somebody's trying to kill me, they're armed people, so police show up ready to go and deal heavily because they think there are armed parties on the scene. Or somebody calls up and says, people in the house, they're armed and they're threatening folk with a gun and they're saying they're going to shoot somebody. So SWAT team shows up ready to go. And if somebody makes the slightest wrong movement, it's likely to all go south and somebody's dying or there's some shots fired and it's a mess. See, that's a punk play. That's another punk play. Now,
What of the people doing these prank calls?
prank calls, that is straight up punk.
Yeah, like
You
leave these
doing that,
families
your
alone.
manhood is questionable.
So it
You're
said,
a punk.
so as we all know, last week Thursday, the mother of Karmelo Anthony revealed that her husband had to take a leave from his job because of harassment targeting his employer, and also Jeff McCaff, he had to leave his job as well. So everyone involved, it says everyone involved in investigation from the police to attorneys and the courts to our address and my husband's previous employee's address has been put on all social media platforms. So this thing is, it's getting out of hand.
It's a damn shame, because the reality is this is one of the most common kind of cases in the criminal justice system.
Mhm.
White folks shoot black folk shoot white folk, or stab white folk, or white folks stab black folk. Hispanic folks still stab or shoot black folk, and vice versa, and it goes on at great length. So I fault the mainstream media for hyping this stuff, because it dovetails in with some politics right now. And it is absolutely crazy. It is to the benefit of the Democratic Party to get the black community riled up, and it's to the benefit of some other people who have another agenda to push what has been put in place, so that there is racial animosity that develops for no reason at all, other than that mainstream media, the Democratic Party, and some right-wing cranks can take advantage of it. It'll get somebody killed, and it is not going to do one damn thing to cure the underlying problem, which is the perception on one side that they are perpetual victims, and that they're looking for some way to get vengeance the wrong kind of way, instead of just saying, hey, be strong and get your stuff together. It also has a socio pathology aspect, which is the acculturation and socialization of youth does not flow, because when punks go stab somebody using deadly force in what is a fist fight, stand and get the butt beat, show you have something and beat butt, or run, or say, hey, that's enough, and
Oh,
shake hands. When you don't do that, you get this, oh my God, we need to protect the children from bullying, with lack of manners.